Hello and welcome in. It's a Sunday takeaway version of Always College Football. We appreciate you being here. As you guys know that have been with us for a while, on our Sunday show, it's kind of streaming consciousness, okay? You need to check back in tomorrow. That's our Upon Further Review show. And that's when we dive a little bit deeper. 'Cause today is kind of surface level reaction. So if you're looking for just a touch deeper, we'll do that tomorrow on Monday's show, the 10 things we learned. But today, we kind of dive into some initial thoughts on what we saw yesterday, kind of putting a bow on Saturday's activities. Let's start. We usually start in chronological order, not usually by the biggest story or the biggest game or the most surprising outcome. We'll start in chronological order, and we will start with the Texas Longhorns. Wow. Win the coin toss, take the ball right down the field. Resulted in a touchdown, wiped out by the penalty, right? That was a clinic yesterday. A clinic by the Longhorns and Steve Sarkisian from the very beginning to involve the tight end like Gunnar Helm, to be able to continue to get Quinn Ewers super comfortable by being outrageously efficient on third down, especially in the first half. They were 8 of 10 on third down in the first half while holding Michigan to just 1 of 5 on third downs in the first half. That thing was 24-3 at halftime, and it felt like it could have been a lot more. It felt like there was plays that were left on the field by the Longhorns and a couple plays that were wiped out, had the missed field goal, what have you. That was a really impressive start. Their receivers, and we've kind of talked and wondered about this with Texas, right? Looked like to me their receivers have a lot of juice. Now, last year, you think about what Xavier Worthy was, and how we saw on Thursday, just how good he is, by the way, in the NFL in his debut, but how good he was after the catch, right? It's looking more and more, and we said this on Thursday's show in the preview, it's looking more and more like this Texas wide receiver group, all of their receivers now can operate after the catch. I mean, I think about half of their total receiving yardage was actually after the catch in this particular game. So very, very impressive performance by their offense. How about their defense? To hold Michigan to 80 yards rushing on 23 carries. That's the lowest rushing yardage total for Michigan since 2020. They had just one carry that went for more than 9 yards, and it went for 12, by the way. So in case you're wondering how that big run resulted, that's why. And people are blaming Davis Warren. I think Davis Warren is who he is. I think he's a fine player. I don't think he's a guy that can carry you to victory. This has to be a group that can run the football. This has to be a group that can play great defense. This has to be an offensive line that mows people over, and they're not capable of doing that against the teams that they might face at the top of the sport, a la Texas, potentially Ohio State down the road, Penn State if they get the opportunity to play them. It's going to be tough, I think, for Michigan this year. Look, we said from the beginning, I think Michigan and Florida State at the very beginning of the year in the preseason, I said those are the two teams that are most likely to finish outside the top 25. Those are the two teams I have the biggest question marks about. All their fans got really upset with us. We've been pro-Michigan for years. Have loved what they've had, have loved their personnel, have loved their identity. We have been super supportive of the Wolverines on this show. They're not the same team. They're not even close. And while the game on Saturday was decisive, it could have been worse. That's the scary thing if you're Michigan. It could have been worse. There's a lot still to play for sure. But turnovers, offensive line play, the secondary, which is supposed to be a strength, having corners opposite Will Johnson getting picked on, they got some problems at Michigan. And while I think they're still going to be a tough team to beat, I don't think they're anywhere near the top of the Big Ten, even though Penn State, we'll talk about them in a minute, Oregon, we'll talk about them in a minute. I think really beyond Ohio State, there's a lot of question marks right now, kind of across the board in the Big Ten. So Michigan, bad performance, but Texas, man, we're going to find this out as the season goes along. Was that about, and we'll ask this question about a bunch of teams this week, was that more about Michigan being average, or was that more about Texas being dominant? I happen to think it's a little bit more of Texas, kind of having a bit more of a takeaway about how great that team might be. And Michigan kind of is who we thought they were. They're a solid team. They're an 8-4, 9-3 team, maybe this year, but man, they're going to have their hands full. And Texas, I think, is a legitimate national championship contender. We've thought that for a while, so not super surprised by the performance yesterday. Thought they'd win convincingly. They did. They did so in dominant fashion. Was just super impressed with what they did on both sides of the ball. Let's go next to the 2:30 window. And the 2:30 window was an intriguing one. 2:30 Central Time, by the way. Notre Dame. Notre Dame. We praised Notre Dame for their performance last week and how they figured things out in the fourth quarter and going on the road and showing a level of toughness and all that stuff. Like, they deserved tons of credit for their victory against Texas A&M and the way they won it and the way they kind of took over the game as the game went along and made the critical plays as the game went along. But I still don't recall on this show ever jumping to a conclusion that Notre Dame is all of a sudden a national championship contender. I don't know where people thought that. Like, A&M's an 8-4 team. They beat them and they looked good in the process. A&M might not even be an 8-4 team, by the way. I think that's probably their ceiling. Maybe it's slightly beyond that, but about an 8-win team. Beating them the way they beat them and didn't really have me feeling as if Notre Dame all of a sudden has joined the ranks of the elite. I think Notre Dame's a good, solid team. I think they're a playoff contender. I think they'll still probably be in a good position to get in the playoff. But, man, they're just not elite offensively. And they didn't showcase any level of elite play when they played A&M. Like, I think their backs are good. I think the offensive line played pretty good down the stretch. But that offensive line and that offense, really in general, not good. The interception, too, by Riley Leonard. I know, look, he was a little bit banged up. They say he has an upper body injury into the first half, all this other stuff. But that interception with 6 minutes left was it's just an inexcusable decision. I mean, it's an inexcusable, it just can't happen. You absolutely can't happen. You give the ball back to them, they're at the 50-yard line, they can go down, kick the game-winning field goal. Just can't happen. The guys played too much football to make a mistake like that. I think Notre Dame has a lot of soul searching to do, and Marcus Freeman hasn't quite figured out the recipe. You read about their preparation this week, super physical Tuesday practice, super physical Wednesday practice, trying to jumpstart the engine, not allowing them to kind of rest on their laurels because they've run into this situation in the past. Hey, they're reading their press clippings a bit, great performance, great win, and then boom, come back the next week, not good, right? We've seen them play poorly in weeks 2 in the past. So Marcus Freeman may be adjusting his approach, and it just hasn't taken yet. But here's the issue. I think your quarterback is inconsistent throwing the football. He has been from day one. I think Riley Leonard's a great athlete. I think he's got a ton of ability with the ball in his hands, but I do think he's inconsistent throwing it. That's who he's been. And I just don't know at this point if Notre Dame, their defense did an amazing job, by the way. Like, the defense, they held Northern Illinois without a touchdown in the final 50 minutes of the game. The offense really had no opportunity. Notre Dame had 11 possessions. 2 ended in interceptions, 5 ended in putts, and 2 ended in blocked field goals. Like, just too many mistakes from Notre Dame. And I wonder, too, as we continue to move forward, the 4-team playoff, right? The 4-team playoff, and we've kind of hypothesized about this throughout the offseason. The 4-team playoff, you had to be nearly perfect to make the playoff, right? Like, you didn't have an opportunity to stray. You had to be great. You couldn't lose more than one. If you did, you were likely going to be on the outside looking in. So you had to thread the needle. Now in the 12-team playoff era, guys are going to let their guards down. Guys are going to have subpar performance. And I think we're going to have more inconsistency potentially at the top of the sport, because Notre Dame all week was saying, oh, you're in the playoff. Punch their ticket to the playoff with that win against A&M. The schedule's easy. Yeah, but everyone can still get you if you play poorly and you refuse to execute. Heartbreaking defeat for Notre Dame, but still a lot to play for and a lot to improve. This is the first win by Northern Illinois, by the way, over a top 10 opponent, and the first by a MAC team against an AP top 5 team. The MAC was previously 0-51. So just to put that loss in perspective by Notre Dame, credit to Northern Illinois. They took it to them, and hey, they were not afraid. They actually, I think, in many ways, handle the line of scrimmage better than most teams at the G5 level would do against a group like that. Let's go next to the nightcap, Tennessee and NC State. Just a couple of notes here. We've spent all off season talking about Nico Iamaleava, and it's understandable. And the Tennessee offense and how exciting it's going to be. And Joe Milton was really the issue last year. So now that they're going to get improved quarterback play, this Tennessee team goes from being a solid team, good team, to now a potentially great team. All that's well and good. I thought Nico had his ups and downs in the game. But let's just acknowledge what this team really is. They're an outfit that can kill you on defense. They can wear you out on the defensive side. And I think Grayson McCall, he's going to be sore today. And that NC State offense, 143 yards of offense. That was an incredible performance by Tim Banks. His defensive staff, he's the defensive coordinator there at Tennessee. Incredible performance. It never felt like NC State could get anything manufactured offensively. Just completely locked down all over the field. How about these for a couple numbers that I came across as I was kind of reading up on the game this morning? Double-digit tackles for loss. 16 different players accounted for 13 tackles for loss. They held NC State to 39 rushing yards, had 3 takeaways, 2 in the second half, and Tennessee just completely shut them down. Completely shut them down in the best possible way. So I think look, Nico, we're all hyped up about his potential, as we should be. And he's a young quarterback. He's going to have some growing pains. There's going to be weeks where he's elite, and there's going to be weeks where maybe he isn't so good. Tennessee has the defense that will keep them in every game, regardless of how their offense plays. And ultimately, hey, when you score 50, you're winning the game. But the defense gave that Tennessee offense so many different opportunities to be in those positions, and the run game and everything else. Like, I'm very bullish with what I saw in Tennessee this past weekend because, hey, I know that they're going to score. Josh Heupel's always scored, but the defense, man, that's the difference between being a good team and an elite team, and they have guys on the defensive line that can flat out take over the game. Let's go to another game in the nightcap, Nebraska and Colorado. How about the fact that Colorado, and just a complete buzzsaw, by the way, I mean, Colorado got crushed along the line of scrimmage. How about Nebraska? 6 sacks, interception to the house, 4 PBUs, just over 50% completion percentage, complete dominant performance by their defense. Absolutely amazing. And I think, too, the pass defense, we know that this is a good group up front defensively, but Nebraska's back end, man, they did a great job. And many people after the performance that we saw from Colorado thought, hey, you know what? They're maybe a little bit better up front. No, they're not. They're not better up front. And frankly, when you watch Colorado, Shedeur Sanders holds the ball too long. I mean, we can blame the offensive line. We can blame all these other things. There were a few different times on Saturday night where I felt like he held it way too long. And that ball's got to get out. I mean, your quarterback, you have to help your offensive line to an extent. And I know he's trying to keep his eyes downfield. He's trying to hold it and allow it to make plays. You got to get the ball out. I mean, your offensive line's struggling. Get the ball out. Help him out. And I need to go back and probably chart how long he held it and the time that it took between snap and when he released the ball. But I would have bet it's probably in the mid 3s, 3.5, which is on the high side. And that's asking a lot for that offensive line to hold up for that long to allow those excellent receivers to break loose. The other thing I would say, too, is that Colorado, they're way too one-dimensional, man. Like, and I know that they're down 28-0 or whatnot, but they're way too one-dimensional. Like, the threat of the run has to be there to an extent. It has to be there. And it just wasn't. So, tremendous amount of credit from Nebraska. The defensive performance was exceptionally good. Offense, good early. Not quite as good in the second half. So, still things to kind of figure out. But, hey, they didn't make any critical mistakes that would put them in position to kind of give the momentum back to the Buffalo. So I thought it was, and by the way, wasn't it fun to just see Nebraska re-engaged? I mean, Nebraska has gone through some hard times, man. There's no denying that Nebraska has been on the struggle bus for nearly 20 years. Feels like, now I'm not saying they're back yet. I'm not going to go that far just yet. but it's feeling like things for Nebraska are trending in the right direction. Are they not? I hope Nebraska fans sense that as well, because from the outside looking at it, it just feels like there's an energy, there's a momentum, there's naturally a lot of excitement. But Matt Rule is a program builder and almost feels like, well, I don't think Colorado's a good program. I don't. I think they're fine. I think they're explosive. I think they're exciting. I think they're fun to watch. And I hope that things can get going for Prime. I don't think you can necessarily put a bow on Nebraska and say, oh, yeah, they're Big Ten contenders just yet. I don't know if I'm going to go that far because of the win against Colorado. But I do think that in time, whether it's this year, next year, the year after that, I'd be shocked if Matt Rule doesn't have this group in position to start hanging banners. Like, I think he's that good. And I think the steps that they've already taken from year one to year two feels like the improvements, they're not incremental, they're significant. So very exciting for them. Let's go next to Oklahoma State and Arkansas. This is an early game. So I said chronological order, clearly not the case. Like I said, streaming consciousness. Watching the first half, I'm sitting there thinking, man, Arkansas is going to be a problem for a lot of folks, right? Arkansas is going to be a team that's going to be real tough to handle. They're explosive. They have good weapons. They have fast quarterback that can create a lot with his legs. Defensive line can take over the game. And then you look at the box score. It's like, man, how did Arkansas lose this game? They had 650 yards of offense, and they held Oklahoma State to just 385. Well, there were a lot of missed opportunities, I feel like, for Arkansas. They could have been up probably 28-7. They could have been up maybe 28-zip. Instead, you have punts, fumbles. You have Ramsey miss the field goal, and then you give it up on down. So there were missed opportunities, missed assignments. And then you got to also give credit to Oklahoma State, who started to get a little bit better field position there in the second half, and a team that never pressed the panic button. I mean, it was understandable when you look at Oklahoma State, man, they're in a hole at home against a team that they were favored against. A lot of buzz about Oklahoma State punching their ticket to the playoff, veteran roster, elite running back. Well, the running game's not going. The running game was bad news bears. I mean, they ran for 59 yards in the game. So to see the passing game kind of elevate to neutralize that gap was impressive. Oklahoma State does not win that game last year. Alan Bowman would not have been capable, I think, of throwing their way to victory last year. But this year, when Ollie Gordon bottled up, things not really going your way, this team just weathered the storm, made some adjustments defensively in the second half, and found a way to get it done at the very end. Just a tremendous resolve from Oklahoma State yesterday and battling back, flipping the script at halftime, and then ultimately winning the game in overtime. Let's go to some close calls. Penn State, my goodness. I mean, defensively, when was the last time we saw Penn State play that poorly defensively in the first half? I mean, I mean, they averaged giving up almost 8 yards of play on 36 snaps. Think about that. 24 points, 286 yards, and nearly 8 yards of play to Bowling Green. If that was against Ohio State, think about what that might have looked like. Well, what the heck happened at halftime? Because in the second half, Bowling Green was held to just 89 total yards, 3 points, and 3 yards of play. And not to mention a couple turnovers that were forced that made this thing look a whole lot better. So the tackling was terrible. It was a really poor performance. But if there's one thing that I know that Penn State overall this season is going to be pretty salty on defense. I'm not super concerned about that. But that was a little bit of a eyebrow-raising moment when I'm watching them in the first half. It just didn't look like – it looked like there were imposters wearing Penn State uniforms. That is not the defense that I've come to expect in Happy Valley over the last handful of years. So glad to see that things got corrected after halftime, but fortunate there because that thing was ugly there in the first half. Speaking of ugly, Oregon, they're 2-0. But I'm not sure you can have a less impressive start to the season. A season that's expected to contend for a new championship in a new league, a season that's expected to contend for a potential national championship. All that stuff is great, but man, they got issues right now. And here's what's concerning. Yeah, they won the game. tons of credit, tons of respect for Boise State. They're a giant killer. Boise State's always been an elite program. Not at all surprised to see them go to Eugene and give Oregon all they want. But at the same time, when you need multiple returns for touchdowns, to have Tez Johnson and Noah Whittington go back on a punt and kickoff return respectively for touchdowns. And you had moments in the passing game that looked pretty good, but the offensive line, man, like this is supposed to be one of the strengths of the team. One of the better offensive lines, not just in the Big Ten, but in the entire country. And yet Dylan Gabriel, I mean, he was sacked 4 times in the first half. This was a group that gave up, I think, 5 sacks last year. So kind of frightening here in the first couple weeks to see Oregon, what's supposed to be a strength of their team, the line of scrimmage, looking like it's everything but a strength. So they got to get that situated. And I thought that things were handled appropriately by Dan Lanning there after the game, saying, we got things to figure out. We got to coach them up. Like, we got to get better. 100% agree with that because there's a lot of room for improvement from the Oregon Ducks. Georgia rolled, Ohio State rolled, Bama, slow start early, figured things out and poured it on there in the fourth quarter, but not a great performance through 3 quarters of action. Actually, I mean, everything but being a great performance, up 14-13 there through 3. Fourth quarter, they outscore South Florida 28-3. But still, some things to iron out. That one just never really had much rhythm going there in the first half. It was just not a great performance by any stretch of the imagination, but it was nice to see Jam Miller and Jalen Miller kind of get going as this game went along. Ole Miss continues to look outstanding. Very impressed with what I saw from them. Missouri shutting out Buffalo 38-0. Defense has been the question mark for Missouri coming into the season. I'm not sure they've been challenged yet, but still very, very impressive. How about the performance by South Carolina? We were on the call. South Carolina's defensive line and secondary, frankly, all 3 levels of their defense, I'm not sure that they're SEC championship contender status just yet, but they got LSU coming to town next week. They got Ole Miss coming to town in a couple weeks. They go to Alabama. They have Missouri at their place late in the year. Like, South Carolina is going to be, if they can stay healthy, they're going to be a huge problem for teams. And whether or not their offense can manufacture enough points to pull off upsets is to be determined. But I'm telling you, man, that defense and that defensive line in particular, they are unbelievably disruptive. So anyone that has South Carolina on the schedule, be super careful. And that starts with LSU, who did not play great, I might add, this past weekend against Nichols. But either way, be careful next week. Houston and Oklahoma, really a tremendous performance defensively from Houston. Wow. I mean, I did not anticipate that one being super competitive, but Houston's defense and Willie Fritz and that group, man, they gave Oklahoma all they wanted and made things very difficult for the Sooners there as the game went along. Never really had a whole lot going offensively. A decent start. My goodness, man, that was a real close call. As the game went along, they hung on for dear life, 16-12. A few other games that we'll get to. Illinois, nice win over a ranked Kansas team. Maybe we're a year early on Illinois. People kind of liked them last year. Maybe they were just a little bit too far out in front of their skis. Auburn, goodness gracious, what color jersey are you wearing? They had how many turnovers? 5? A lot of people crushing Peyton Thorne. I thought there were a couple bad decisions for sure. I also did not think the wide receivers played well whatsoever. That was a group that was supposed to be significantly improved. I thought the receivers, based on what we saw week 1, massive regression. And then the decision-making for Peyton Thorne, he was pressing and trying to do a lot, a couple picks there at the end that made the score look even worse. Just not good decision-making, not a good performance from Auburn whatsoever. That's a black eye, I think, for Peyton Thorne and for Hugh Freeze. Thought for sure they were going to be 4-0 when Oklahoma came to town here in a couple weeks. Obviously, big loss and a huge win for Cal. Justin Wilcox, their head coach, and the ACC. Syracuse gets a big win over Georgia Tech. Hey, Kyle McCord, baby, nearly 400 yards of offense and 4 touchdowns. So that was a big win as well. And then Clemson bounces back in a big way against App State. People thought that game would be close. Clemson puts it on them. 66 points in the process, 5 touchdowns from their quarterback, Cade Klubnik. If we missed your game, Cy-Hawk Trophy, I got to watch that game. We were on at the exact same time. Did not get a chance to watch it. I was doing South Carolina, Kentucky. That game was going on CBS, I believe. I have not had a chance to watch it. I'm going to watch it. We will revisit it on Monday edition of Always College Football. Thanks for being here. Like I said, streaming consciousness. If we missed your game, if we didn't highlight your team, check back with us again tomorrow. That's our Upon Further Review show. So we'll talk a little bit deeper, a little bit more about some of the big storylines coming out of the week. And for all of us here at Always College Football, from Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing Sunday. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.